A bitter December wind sliced through Boston's Oakwood cemetery, rattling the skeletal branches of ancient oaks like whispers of forgotten promises. The sky hung low, gray and heavy, as if mourning alongside the man who stood alone before a granite headstone. At 58, James Caldwell, billionaire CEO of Caldwell Technologies, cut an imposing figure even in his solitude. His silver-streaked hair, meticulously styled, gleamed under the weak morning light, and his tailored cashmere coat shielded him from the cold, but not from the weight of his past. For 20 years, this annual pilgrimage to Elizabeth Harper's grave had been his unspoken penance, a ritual to confront the ghosts of a marriage shattered by his own hand. James knelt, his gloved fingers brushing the frost from the headstone's inscription. Elizabeth Harper, 1972 to 2005. Architect of dreams, builder of hope. The words, simple yet piercing, mocked the complexity of their shared history. He placed a bouquet of white carnations, her favorite, against the stone, their delicate petals trembling in the wind. 20 years had passed since Elizabeth's death, yet the memory of their final, venomous argument still clawed at him. His words, sharp as the winter air, had accused her of betrayal, of carrying another man's child. He had been so certain, so unyielding, armed with a medical diagnosis that declared him sterile. That certainty had cost him everything. As he rose, the crunch of gravel underfoot broke the silence. The morning fog, thick and ghostly, began to lift, revealing a figure moving through the mist. A young man, perhaps 20, tall and lanky, with a face that stirred an unsettling sense of déjà vu. His dark hair fell slightly over his brow, but it was his eyes' emerald green, unmistakably Elizabeth's, that pinned James in place. The stranger stopped a few paces from the grave, his gaze shifting from the headstone to James. His expression flickered from surprise to something harder, a carefully contained anger that seemed to burn beneath the surface. "You're him, aren't you?" the young man said, his voice low, carrying a tremor of restrained emotion. James Caldwell. James straightened, his instincts honed by decades of boardroom battles kicking in. "Yes," he replied cautiously, his deep voice steady despite the unease curling in his chest. "Do I know you?" The young man's laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. "No, we don't. That's rather the point." He gestured toward Elizabeth's grave, his hand steady but his eyes blazing. "But I know her. I've been visiting my mother's grave every week since I was old enough to come here." Alone, he paused, his next words landing like a thunderclap. "Dad, she hid me from you for 20 years. The world seemed to tilt. James felt the blood drain from his face, the wind's howl fading to a dull roar in his ears. Dad. The word was impossible, a violation of everything he knew to be true. Dr. Susan Bennett, the nation's foremost fertility specialist, had confirmed his sterility 2 decades ago after exhaustive tests. A childhood bout with multiple sclerosis had left him incapable of fathering a child, or so he'd been told. Yet this young man, with Elizabeth's eyes and a jawline that mirrored James's own, stood before him, claiming a truth that shattered the foundations of his carefully ordered life. "I'm Michael Harper," the young man continued, his voice steady now, though his hands clenched at his sides. "I turn 20 next month. Mom told me everything before she died, about how you were told you couldn't have kids, about how you called her a liar and a cheat when she got pregnant, about how you threw her out rather than believe her." James's mind raced, grappling for an anchor. "This is impossible," he managed, his voice barely audible over the wind. He studied Michael's face, searching for a flaw, a lie, but the resemblance was undeniable. The high cheekbones, the distinctive Caldwell brow features that had marked generations of his family stared back at him. And those eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, held a truth he couldn't dismiss. Michael reached into his jacket, producing a sealed envelope. "Mom left me this to give to you if we ever met. She wrote it before she died." His hand was steady as he extended it, while James's trembled slightly as he accepted the worn paper. The envelope felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of 2 decades of secrets. Inside, he glimpsed Elizabeth's distinctive handwriting, but he couldn't bring himself to open it, not yet. I couldn't," James stammered, his usual composure crumbling. He clutched the envelope, his mind a storm of doubt and dread. Could Dr. Bennett have been wrong? Could Elizabeth, the woman he'd loved and then banished, have been telling the truth all along? Michael's gaze softened, but only slightly. "I'm ready for a DNA test whenever you are," he said, his tone clipped but not hostile. I've had 20 years to prepare for this moment. You've had about 20 minutes. Take whatever time you need to process." He turned to leave, his boots crunching against the frozen ground, but James's voice stopped him. "Wait," James called, his breath visible in the cold air. "Where can I reach you?" Michael paused, not turning around. "I'll be back next Sunday, same time." She always liked the morning light on her headstone. With that, he walked into the fading mist, leaving James alone with the grave and the envelope that burned in his hand. James stood frozen, the cemetery's silence pressing against him. The world beyond Oakwood was chaos. His company, Caldwell Technologies, was embroiled in a high-profile scandal over a data breach involving their latest AI platform, NeuralSync. Social media platforms like X were ablaze with speculation, accusing him of negligence or worse. Reporters hounded his office, and shareholders demanded answers. Yet here, in this quiet corner of Boston, none of that mattered. The young man's words echoed in his mind. *Bad. She hid me from you for 20 years. He looked down at the envelope, his fingers tracing the edges. Elizabeth had always been meticulous, her architectural designs precise yet soulful, like the woman herself. What had she written in her final days? An accusation? A plea? Or something else entirely? The thought of opening it here, now, felt like defiling the sanctity of her grave. He slipped it into his coat pocket, the weight of it a constant reminder of the truth he wasn't ready to face. James's driver waited at the cemetery's edge, but he waved the man off, needing the solitude of the walk back to his Beacon Hill mansion. The city was waking up, its streets buzzing with the hum of electric cars and the glow of holographic billboards advertising the latest tech gadgets. Boston in 2025 was a city of contrasts, old money elegance clashing with the relentless march of innovation. Caldwell Technologies had fueled that march, revolutionizing AI-driven urban planning, but the cost had been personal. James had built an empire, but at 58, he had no one to share it with. His 2 brief marriages after Elizabeth had been strategic alliances, ending in amicable but distant divorces. His sister, Margaret, was the only one who dared call out the emptiness of his life. But even her words couldn't pierce the armor he'd built. As he walked, Michael's face haunted him. The young man's anger had been tempered, controlled, but it was there, simmering beneath the surface. James recognized that restraint, it was his own, a trait he'd honed in boardrooms and negotiations. But those eyes, they were Elizabeth's, alive with the same fire that had once drawn him to her. He remembered their first meeting at a famille Jing, at a Bamei Gala for Sustainable Architecture in 1998. She'd been a rising star, her designs gracing skylines from Seattle to Miami. He'd been the ambitious heir, determined to triple his family's fortune. Their connection had been electric, undeniable, until he'd let pride and a flawed diagnosis tear it apart. Back at his mansion, James stood in his study, the envelope still unopened on his desk. The room was his shrine to his success, mahogany. Walls lined with awards, a panoramic view of Boston's skyline, and a neural sync prototype humming softly in the corner. Yet it felt hollow. He poured a glass of 18-year-old scotch, the burn of it grounding him as he stared at the envelope. Michael's words replayed. "She hid me from you for 20 years. How could a man worth billions not know he had a son? What could drive a woman like Elizabeth to keep such a secret? And what would happen when the truth, buried for 2 decades, finally broke free?" The questions swirled, each one a thread pulling at the fabric of his life. James knew he couldn't ignore this. He would call Robert Langston, the private investigator whose discretion had saved him during the neural sync crisis. He would contact Dr. Susan Bennett, retired but still consulting at Massachusetts General. And he would face Michael again next Sunday, under the morning light Elizabeth had loved. For the first time in years, James Caldwell felt something other than ambition or regret fear. Yes, but also a flicker of hope. What if the impossible was true? What if the past he'd buried was standing before him, demanding to be seen? 22 years earlier, Boston shimmered under the golden glow of autumn 2003, a city pulsing with ambition and old-world charm. James Caldwell, then 36, was the heir to Caldwell Technologies, a rising star in the tech world, steering the company toward dominance in early AI applications for urban infrastructure. Elizabeth Harper, 31, was a visionary architect whose sustainable designs were reshaping skylines across the Northeast. Together, they were Boston's golden couple, a union of intellect and charisma that turned heads at every gala and boardroom they entered. Their Beacon Hill mansion, a restored 19th-century masterpiece, was more than a home. It was a testament to their shared dreams. Its sleek interiors, blending Elizabeth's architectural genius with James's cutting-edge tech integrations. Their marriage, initially dismissed by Boston's elite as a fleeting clash of 2 headstrong personalities, had defied expectations for 5 years. They were a perfect alchemy. James's relentless drive to expand his family's legacy complemented Elizabeth's creative vision, which infused her buildings with both beauty and environmental consciousness. At charity galas, they moved as one, their conversations sparking with wit and mutual respect. Business magazines dubbed them the power couple who had it all, featuring glossy photos of them laughing at fundraisers or collaborating on projects that married technology and design. When they walked into a room, the air shifted not just because of their wealth or striking appearances, but because of the electric connection that seemed to bind them, a force that felt invincible. Yet beneath the polished surface, cracks had begun to form, subtle but persistent. 2 years into their marriage, James had received a devastating diagnosis from Dr. Susan Bennett, a leading fertility specialist at Massachusetts General Hospital. Comprehensive tests, prompted by their struggles to conceive, revealed that a childhood bout with multiple sclerosis had left him sterile. The news hit James like a physical blow, shaking the confidence that defined him. He and Elizabeth had discussed adoption, but their careers, his expansion of Caldwell Technologies into global markets, her commissions for eco-friendly skyscrapers took precedence. They buried the pain, convincing themselves they had time. But the unspoken grief lingered, a shadow neither acknowledged. On a crisp October evening in 2003, everything changed. Elizabeth burst into the study of their Beacon Hill mansion, her emerald eyes alight with a joy James hadn't seen in months. She was almost bouncing, her hands clasped together as if holding a precious secret. "James, I have incredible news," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air, bright and fragile, but the silence that followed stretched like an eternity. James set down his tumbler of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the firelight from the marble hearth. His face shifted from shock to suspicion and hardened into a cold fury that Elizabeth had never seen. "Pregnant," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you expect me to believe this child is mine?" Elizabeth stood frozen by the fireplace, her hands instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "James, please," she said, her voice breaking. "You know I've never been with anyone else. This is our miracle." His laugh cut through the room, sharp and bitter. "Miracle? I've been to every specialist in the country, Elizabeth. The diagnosis was clear. I can't father children. So tell me, whose miracle are you carrying?" The accusation landed like a slap, and Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. But James pressed on, his voice rising. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? That you could pass this off as mine?" The argument escalated, each word a dagger. Elizabeth's denials grew desperate, her voice cracking as she pleaded. "I've loved you faithfully for 5 years," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I would never betray you. There must be a mistake with the tests." She reached for him, but James stepped back, his face a mask of betrayal. "The mistake," he said coldly, "was me believing you were different. That you married me for love, not my name or my fortune." The room felt smaller, the air thick with pain. Elizabeth tried to explain, her voice shaking. "I insisted on another test at a different clinic last week, James. The doctor said it's rare, but sometimes the tests are wrong. Please, let's do this together. Get another opinion." But James was beyond reason, his pride wounded, his trust shattered. He'd had 3 separate tests at top facilities, all confirming Dr. Bad's findings. The idea of a mistake felt like a taunt, a challenge to the certainty he clung to in a world he could no longer control. "I trusted you," he said, his voice low and venomous. "I built this life with you, and this is how you repay me." Elizabeth's sobs filled the silence, but James was relentless. "Keep the child, keep whatever story you've concocted, but you'll do it far away from me and without the Caldwell name." By midnight, he had called his lawyers, instructing them to prepare divorce papers and a financial settlement contingent on Elizabeth signing a non-disclosure agreement. He offered her a generous sum enough to start over, but it came with a condition. She was to vanish from his life entirely. Elizabeth, heartbroken and humiliated, packed a single suitcase with personal belongings, leaving behind the mansion, the memories, and the life they'd built. As she stepped into the cold Boston night, her hand rested on her stomach, a silent vow to protect the child James refused to claim. The fallout was swift and brutal. Boston's elite, ever hungry for gossip, whispered about the sudden end of the city's golden couple. James deflected questions with practiced ease, burying himself in work as Caldwell Technologies launched a groundbreaking AI platform for smart cities. Elizabeth, meanwhile, disappeared from the social scene, her name fading from architectural journals as she retreated to Burlington, Vermont, a quiet town far from the spotlight. The divorce was finalized within weeks, the settlement ensuring her silence but not her dignity. James threw himself into his empire, working 16-hour days to drown out the pain. He told himself he'd been right, that Elizabeth's betrayal justified his actions. But in private moments, alone in the study where their marriage had imploded, doubt crept in. What if she'd been telling the truth? What if the tests were wrong? He dismissed the thoughts, unwilling to entertain the possibility of hope or error. The diagnosis was his shield, his justification for cutting her out of his life. Yet the memory of her tear-streaked face, her trembling voice insisting on her fidelity, haunted him. Elizabeth, in Burlington, began rebuilding. She leveraged her reputation to secure remote consulting work, designing sustainable community centers for small towns struggling with economic decline. The pregnancy progressed normally, but the emotional toll of James's rejection lingered. She confided in Laura Mitchell, a pediatric nurse she met through a single mother support group. Laura became her anchor, her confidant, and later, the godmother to the child Elizabeth carried. In the quiet of her modest apartment, Elizabeth whispered to her unborn baby, promising a life free from the pain of rejection, even if it meant hiding the truth about his father. The world James and Elizabeth had once shared was changing. In 2003, the tech boom was reshaping America, with early social media platforms like Friendster and MySpace hinting at the connected future to come. Boston's economy thrived, but beneath the surface, gender biases persisted in industries like architecture, where Elizabeth had fought to be taken seriously. Her designs, celebrated for their innovation, often came with backhanded compliments about her surprising talent as a woman. James had been her fiercest advocate, amplifying her voice in rooms where she was dismissed. Now, alone, she faced a world that felt colder, harsher, without his support. As the months passed, Elizabeth prepared for single motherhood, her resolve hardening. She refused to contact James, knowing he'd made his choice. But she ensured her child would carry a piece of him, listing James Caldwell as the father on the birth certificate, a quiet act of defiance and truth. She named her son Michael Harper, a nod to her maiden name, but also a shield to protect him from the Caldwell legacy and the man who had rejected them both. In the quiet of Burlington, Vermont, 2004 was a year of new beginnings and hidden scars. Elizabeth Harper, now 32, had left behind the glittering world of Boston's elite, trading her Beacon Hill mansion for a modest one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore on Church Street. The cobblestone charm of Burlington, with its small-town warmth and progressive ideals, offered a sanctuary from the pain of her divorce from James Caldwell. But the weight of his accusations, infidelity, betrayal clung to her like the Vermont winter, cold and unrelenting. Pregnant and alone, Elizabeth rebuilt her life brick by brick, her architect's mind turning chaos into structure for the sake of the child she carried. The apartment was small but hers, filled with second-hand furniture and sketches of sustainable buildings that kept her tethered to her passion. Elizabeth leveraged her reputation to secure remote consulting work, designing community centers and eco-friendly schools for towns grappling with economic decline. The pay was modest compared to her Boston commissions, but it was enough to cover rent and prenatal care, though the latter came at a steep cost. The U.S. healthcare system, even in 2004, was a labyrinth of bureaucracy and expense. Without James's wealth or insurance, Elizabeth navigated high copays and long waits at clinics, her determination fueled by the life growing inside her. Every ultrasound, every heartbeat, was a reminder of the miracle James had refused to believe. Through a single mother's support group at the local community center, Elizabeth met Laura Mitchell, a pediatric nurse with a warm smile and a no-nonsense demeanor. Laura, a Burlington native, became Elizabeth's lifeline, offering practical advice and quiet companionship. Over cups of chamomile tea in Elizabeth's cramped kitchen, they shared stories of resilience, Laura's own struggles as a divorcee, Elizabeth's uprooted life. When Michael Harper was born in April 2004, a healthy 8-pound boy with his father's distinctive chin and a strawberry-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder, Laura was there, holding Elizabeth's hand through a grueling 12-hour labor. "He looks just like his father," Elizabeth whispered, tears mingling with exhaustion as she traced the birthmark, identical to the one James bore, a Caldwell trait passed through generations. Elizabeth named her son Michael Harper, reclaiming her maiden name as a shield against the Caldwell legacy. She listed James as the father on the birth certificate, a quiet act of defiance, preserving the truth for a day she hoped might come. But when Michael was old enough to ask about his father, she crafted a simple lie. "He passed away before you were born, sweetheart." It was a story to protect him, to spare him the sting of rejection she'd endured. Laura, now Michael's godmother, supported the decision, though she urged Elizabeth to consider telling him one day. "He deserves to know who he is," Lavra said gently, but Elizabeth shook her head, her eyes distant. "Not until I know he's strong enough to handle it." The early years tested Elizabeth's resilience. She worked late into the night, sketching designs by the light of a single lamp while Michael slept in a crib beside her. Burlington's economy, strained by the decline of manufacturing and the slow recovery from the early 2000s recession, offered few opportunities for single mothers. Elizabeth took on every project she could, from small library renovations to pro bono work for local nonprofits, building a reputation as a tenacious talent in sustainable design. Her income was enough for rent, groceries, and a modest savings. Account for Michael's future, but medical bills loomed large. A minor infection during Michael's first year cost her thousands. A reminder of the healthcare system's unforgiving math dot as Michael grew. So did his resemblance to James. By age 5, his dark hair and analytical mind echoed his father's, while his curiosity and love for drawing mirrored Elizabeth's creative spirit. He'd sit at her drafting table, scribbling houses with solar panels while she worked, asking questions that revealed a precocious intellect. "Why don't all buildings have gardens on top, Mama?" he'd ask, and Elizabeth would laugh, ruffling his hair. "That's my dream too, Mikey." She enrolled him in Burlington's public schools, known for their progressive curricula, and saved diligently for his college fund. Determined he'd have opportunities, she'd fought for Dot to shield Michael from James's world. Elizabeth avoided publicity. She declined interviews with architectural journals, fearing they might draw attention from Boston's elite or worse, from James himself. When colleagues pressed her about Michael's father, she stuck to her story. A tragic loss, no details. But the truth was never far away. In a locked box under her bed, she kept newspaper clippings from her marriage society pages announcing her wedding to James, profiles of their power couple days. She told herself they were for Michael, a record of his origins, but sometimes, in quiet moments, she'd trace James's face in faded ink, wondering if he ever thought of her. When Michael was 10, Elizabeth launched Harper Designs, a small architectural firm focused on sustainable community projects. The firm thrived modestly, earning her a reputation in Vermont's tight-knit design community. She and Michael moved to a 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Burlington. A fixer-upper, she transformed with skylights and recycled materials. Life felt stable, almost complete, but the past lingered. At 14, Michael found a locked box while searching the attic for art supplies. The yellowed clippings revealed a world he'd never known. His mother, radiant in a wedding gown, beside a man who looked startlingly like him. "He's alive, isn't he?" Michael demanded that night, his voice trembling with betrayal as he held up a clipping. "My father isn't dead." Elizabeth's heart sank. She sat him down, choosing her words carefully. "Yes, he's alive," she admitted. "He's a wealthy businessman who didn't want us. There was a medical misunderstanding, and he thought I'd betrayed him." She explained the diagnosis, James's accusations, but withheld the full cruelty of his rejection, protecting Michael from the pain she still carried. Michael's anger flared, then softened into quiet resolve. "Will I ever meet him?" he asked. Elizabeth touched his cheek. "That's up to you when you're ready." 3 years later, in 2021, Elizabeth's world unraveled again. A routine checkup revealed aggressive breast cancer, stage 3, with a prognosis that offered little hope. The U.S. healthcare system, still reeling from post-pandemic reforms, forced her to drain her savings on treatments, chemotherapy, radiation, surgeries that left her weak but determined to fight for Michael. Lavra moved in to help, managing Michael's schoolwork and meals while Elizabeth endured grueling hospital stays. In her final months, Elizabeth shared the unvarnished truth with Michael, now 17. "I never stopped loving him," she confessed, her voice frail but steady. "But I couldn't let him hurt you the way he hurt me. If you ever want to find him, do it for you, not for me or him." Elizabeth died in February 2022, leaving Michael her architectural firm, their modest savings, and a letter to be opened on his 20th birthday. The letter, written in her precise hand, detailed everything: James's rejection, her decision to hide Michael, and her hope that he might one day choose his own path with his father. Michael, grieving and resolute, began visiting Elizabeth's grave weekly, carrying her love and her secrets as he navigated life without her. Burlington in the 2010s was a microcosm of America's growing divide. The town's progressive ethos clashed with economic realities: rising rents, stagnant wages, and a healthcare system that punished the uninsured. Elizabeth's story reflected the struggles of countless single mothers, balancing ambition with survival. Her firm, Harper Designs, became a beacon for sustainable architecture, but its success was tempered by her refusal to seek the spotlight, a choice rooted in fear of James's reach. Michael, meanwhile, grew into a brilliant young man, excelling in math and art, his mother's pride and his father's echo. Unaware of the empire that bore his birthmark, as Michael approached his 20th birthday, the letter loomed large. He read it alone in their quiet house, the words igniting a mix of anger and curiosity. Elizabeth had protected him, but she'd also given him the power to choose. The decision to confront James at Oakwood Cemetery was not made lightly. It took months of wrestling with grief, doubt, and the weight of a truth that could change everything. Standing by his mother's grave, Michael had prepared for rejection, but he carried her strength, ready to face the man who had shaped his absence. The December wind howled through Oakwood Cemetery, carrying the faint hum of Boston's morning traffic, as James Caldwell stood once more before Elizabeth Harper's grave. It was Sunday, exactly 1 week since Michael Harper's earth-shattering revelation. That she hid me from you for 20 years. The words had haunted James, gnawing at the edges of his meticulously ordered life. At 58, he was a titan of industry, the CEO of Caldwell Technologies, navigating a world where his AI platform, NeuralSync, was both a triumph and a lightning rod for controversy. But here, in the frostbitten silence of the cemetery, none of that mattered. The envelope Michael had given him, still unopened, weighed heavy in his coat pocket, a ticking bomb of truth he wasn't ready to face. James scanned the mist, his heart pounding as he waited for Michael. The young man had promised to return, and James clung to that promise with a mix of dread and curiosity. The past week had been a blur of canceled meetings and sleepless nights. The NeuralSync data breach scandal was escalating, with posts on X accusing Caldwell Technologies of mishandling user data, fueling speculation about James's leadership. Reporters camped outside his Beacon Hill mansion, and shareholders demanded answers. Yet all James could think about was Michael, those emerald eyes, so like Elizabeth's, and the jawline that mirrored his own. Could it be true? Could Dr. Susan Bennett's diagnosis, delivered with clinical certainty 22 years ago, have been wrong? As the morning fog lifted, a figure emerged. Michael Harper, tall and lanky, approached with measured steps, his dark coat blending into the gray of the cemetery. His expression was guarded, but the anger from their first encounter had softened into something more complex resolve, perhaps tinged with vulnerability. "You came," Michael said, stopping a few feet from the grave. His voice was steady, but his hands fidgeted, betraying the weight of the moment. "I said I would," James replied, his tone clipped, a defense against the storm of emotions within. He studied Michael, searching for a flaw, a reason to dismiss him. But the resemblance was undeniable. The Caldwell brow, the sharp chin, and that birthmark, glimpsed in the faded photograph Michael had shown him last week. It was identical to the strawberry-shaped mark on James's own shoulder. A family trait passed down through generations. Michael gestured to the grave, where James's bouquet of white carnations rested beside a fresh bunch of little Michaels. Offering. She always liked Lily, Michael said quietly. Said they reminded her of hope. He paused, then met James's gaze. Did you open the letter? James's hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the envelope lay untouched. Not yet, he admitted, his voice low. I need it. Time. Michael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fair enough. But you should know what's in it. Mom wrote it 3 weeks before she died. She told me everything, how you threw her out, how she raised me alone, how she kept me from you to protect me. His voice cracked slightly. She said you believed you were sterile, that you called her a liar when she told you about me. But she never stopped believing you'd figure it out someday. James felt a pang, sharp and visceral, as Michael's words echoed Elizabeth's from that fateful night in 2003. Asterisk. This is our miracle. He'd rejected her then, armed with Dr. Bennett's diagnosis and his own wounded pride. Now, standing before her son, their son, he felt the ground shift beneath him. This is impossible, he said, though the conviction in his voice wavered. The tests were conclusive. I couldn't. Couldn't what? Michael interrupted, his tone sharp but not unkind. Couldn't be wrong? Couldn't have a son? Mom had a DNA test done right after I was born. Just in case. She knew you'd need proof. He reached into his jacket, producing a faded hospital wristband. The yellowed label read Harrington Michael, a relic from Elizabeth's foresight. She filed my birth certificate with your name. She wasn't hiding me out of spite. She was protecting me from you, from the rejection you gave her. James took the wristband, his fingers trembling as he traced a name. It was a tangible link to a truth he'd denied for 2 decades. If this is true, he said slowly, we'll need a DNA test to confirm it, conclusively. Michael shrugged, a forced casualness that didn't mask the tension in his eyes. I'm ready whenever you are. I've had years to prepare for this. You're the one playing catch-up. He glanced at the grave, his voice softening. I'll be at the University of Vermont, studying architectural engineering. You can reach me through the registrar's office. But I'll be back here next Sunday, same time. Don't make me wait forever. As Michael walked away, disappearing into the mist, James felt a surge of panic. He couldn't let this moment slip away, not without answers. He pulled out his phone and dialed Robert Langston, a private investigator whose discretion had navigated James through the neural sync crisis. I need a full background check, James said, his voice tight. Michael Harper, about 20, lives in Burlington, Vermont. Everything, birth records, school history, anything that connects him to Elizabeth Harper or me. I need it fast. Langston's reply was calm, professional. Give me 3 days, Mr. Caldwell. I'll have what you need. Next, James called. His sister, Margaret Caldwell, the only person he trusted with his vulnerabilities. Margaret, a sharp-witted lawyer who'd never married, was the one family member who saw through his polished exterior. She met him that afternoon at a quiet cafe in Back Bay, her gray eyes narrowing as he recounted the cemetery encounter. You're telling me Elizabeth had a son, your son, and you never knew? She asked, incredulous. James, you threw her out over a medical diagnosis. Did you ever consider it might be wrong? I had 3 tests, Margaret, James snapped, but the defensiveness in his voice betrayed his doubt. The best specialists in the country. It was impossible. Nothing's impossible, Margaret said, leaning forward. You were so busy building your empire, you didn't stop to question it. And now this man shows up, and you're still hesitating? She softened, touching his hand. Open the letter, James. If it's Elizabeth's words, you owe her that much. That night, alone in his Beacon Hill study, James finally opened the envelope. Elizabeth's handwriting, precise and elegant, filled 2 pages. Dated 3 weeks. Before her death in 2022, the letter was a testament to her love and pain. James, it began, I never betrayed you. The tests were wrong. I knew it the moment I felt Michael move inside me. But you made your choice, and I made mine to protect our son. He's brilliant, kind, and carries the best of us both. If you're reading this, it means he's found you. Don't reject him again. He deserves to know the man I loved, not the one who broke us. Tucked inside was a photograph of infant Michael, the strawberry birthmark clear on his shoulder, a mirror to James's own. Tears stung James's eyes, a rare breach of his composure. Elizabeth's words cut deeper than any boardroom defeat. He thought of the neural sync scandal, the headlines accusing him of arrogance and oversight. Was this who he'd become, a man so certain of his truths that he destroyed what mattered most? He called Langston again, urgency in his voice. I need everything by Tuesday. And find Dr. Susan Bennett. She's retired, but she consults at Mass General. I need to know if she made a mistake. By Tuesday, Langston delivered a dossier. Michael Harper, born April 2004 in Burlington, Vermont, to Elizabeth Harper. Graduated with honors from Burlington High School. Now a junior at the University of Vermont, studying architectural engineering. He'd inherited Elizabeth's firm, Harper Designs, and lived frugally, no debts, no scandals. Photographs from infancy to adolescence showed a boy growing into James's features, the Caldwell brow, the sharp chin blended with Elizabeth's vivid eyes. The evidence was overwhelming, but James needed certainty. The media, meanwhile, caught wind of his distraction. A viral post on X speculated about a secret heir after a grainy photo of James and Michael at the cemetery surfaced online. Is Caldwell hiding a son while his AI empire crumbles? The caption read, amassing thousands of likes. The pressure was mounting, but James pushed it aside. He scheduled a meeting with Dr. Bennett for Wednesday and arranged a private DNA test for Friday. Whatever the truth, he would face it not as the untouchable CEO, but as a man who'd lost 20 years to a lie. The Beacon Hill mansion was a fortress of solitude. Its mahogany panels study a silent witness to James Caldwell's unraveling. It was late Wednesday evening, December 2025, and the city of Boston glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. James sat at his desk, the DNA test results from the private lab resting unopened before him. The envelope from Elizabeth Harper, read and reread since the cemetery confrontation 3 days ago, lay beside it, her words searing. Don't reject him again. He deserves to know the man I loved. For the first time in his 58 years, James, the billionaire CEO of Caldwell Technologies, felt utterly powerless, not against shareholders or media, but against the truth staring him in the face. The week had been a descent into chaos. After Michael Harper's bombshell at Oakwood Cemetery, James had canceled board meetings and postponed negotiations for a critical neural sync expansion, drawing raised eyebrows from his team. The AI platform, already under fire for a data breach, was now the subject of a class action lawsuit, with posts on X amplifying public outrage. Caldwell's empire is crumbling. First data leaks. Now, a secret son? The grainy photo of James and Michael at the cemetery had gone viral, fueling speculation about a hidden heir. Yet James barely registered the headlines. His mind was consumed by Michael, those emerald eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, and the strawberry birthmark that marked him as a Caldwell. On Monday, James had met Dr. Susan Bennett, now 70, and a consultant at Massachusetts General Hospital. The meeting, held in her oak-paneled office, was tense, her calm demeanor clashing with his urgency. "Is it possible you were wrong?" James demanded, skipping pleasantries. Could I have fathered a child despite your diagnosis? Dr. Bennett removed her glasses, her gaze thoughtful. Medicine isn't infallible, Mr. Caldwell. In 2003, we used the best technology available, semen analysis, hormonal panels, but errors happened. Your MS history suggested sterility, but there are rare cases where men with similar profiles conceive. I told you it was extremely unlikely, not impossible. Perhaps you heard certainty where I offered probability. James's jaw tightened. You let me believe it was absolute. I gave you the data we had, she replied gently. You were grieving, angry. Sometimes patients need clarity, even if it's incomplete. Her words stung, exposing the arrogance that had blinded him to Elizabeth's truth. He'd clung to the diagnosis like a shield, unwilling to question it, unwilling to hope by Tuesday. Robert Langston, the private investigator, had delivered a comprehensive dossier on Michael Harper. Born April 2004 in Burlington, Vermont, too. Elizabeth Harper, valedictorian at Burlington High School, now a junior at the University of Vermont, majoring in architectural engineering. He'd inherited Harper Designs, Elizabeth's firm, and lived modestly, funding his education through scholarships and his mother's savings. Photographs from Michael's childhood to adolescence were haunting, his features sharpening into James's own, blended with Elizabeth's vivid eyes. Langston's report noted no attempts by Michael to contact James before the cemetery encounter, no signs of opportunism. The boy was clean, driven, and fiercely independent. On Friday morning, James and Michael met at a discreet medical facility in Cambridge. The DNA test was swift, clinical, but the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Michael sat rigid, his gaze fixed on the floor, while James stole glances at him, searching for something to say. "Why now?" James finally asked, his voice low. "Why confront me after all these years?" Michael looked up, his eyes steady. "Mom's letter. She told me to decide for myself when I was ready. I turned 20 last month, and I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to know who you are, not the billionaire on the news, but the man she loved. The man who broke her." The words hit like a fist. James nodded, unable to respond, as the technician collected their samples. 3 hours later, the lab director delivered the results in person. A 99.998% probability of paternity. Michael Harper was, beyond scientific doubt, James Caldwell's son. The drive back to James's mansion was silent, the weight of the truth settling between them like a third passenger in the study. The same room where James had rejected Elizabeth's pregnancy. Announcement 22 years ago. They faced each other. James poured 2 glasses of water scotch, felt wrong for this moment, and sat across from Michael. "I owe you an apology," he began, then corrected himself. "No, I owe you and your mother everything. I was wrong catastrophically, unforgivably." "Wrong." Michael's response was measured, his voice steady but laced with pain. "I didn't come for apologies. I came for the truth. Mom said you were a man who built empires, but couldn't see what was right in front of you. She loved you until the end, you know? Even after everything." James's throat tightened. "She never betrayed me," he said, more to himself than Michael. "I let pride and a flawed diagnosis destroy what mattered most. I told myself it was easier to believe she'd lied than to hope for something I'd been told was impossible." Michael leaned forward, his eyes searching. "And now? What does this change?" "Everything," James said, the word heavy with realization. "But I don't expect you to trust me overnight. I've had 20 minutes to process what you've lived with for years." Michael nodded, a flicker of respect in his gaze. "I'm not here to join your empire, Mr. Caldwell. I have Mom's firm, my own path. I just needed you to know I exist." The conversation ended abruptly when James's phone buzzed. A shareholder, demanding an emergency meeting about the neural sync. "Lawsuit," Michael stood to leave, but James stopped him. "Come to Burlington next weekend," he said. "Let's talk again. Not here, not in my world, yours." Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but don't expect me to call you Dad." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of awkward encounters and tentative steps. James, unaccustomed to stepping away from work, reduced his schedule, delegating NeuroSync's crisis management to his crew. He drove to Burlington every Saturday, meeting Michael at a coffee shop near the University of Vermont. Their conversations were stilted at first, orbiting around safe topics: Elizabeth's love for sustainable design, Michael's studies, the Vermont winters. But beneath the surface, mutual interests emerged. Michael shared Elizabeth's passion for architecture, sketching buildings that balanced form and function. James recognized his own analytical mind in Michael's approach to math, his ability to dissect complex problems with ease. The media frenzy intensified, with ex-posts speculating about Michael's motives. Is Caldwell's son after his billions? One viral thread asked, prompting thousands of comments. Michael, aware of the chatter, brushed it off, but James saw the strain in his eyes. "They don't know you," James said during one visit, his voice firm. "Let me handle it." Michael shook his head. "I don't need your protection. I've handled worse." He paused, then added, "Mom taught me to stand on my own." James's sister, Margaret, became an unexpected bridge. During a dinner at her Back Bay condo, she met Michael and wept openly at the resemblance. "He has Dad's expressions," she told James later, her voice thick with emotion. "And your stubborn chin. How could you not see it?" Margaret's warmth disarmed Michael, and she shared stories of James as a young man, ambitious but kind, before pride hardened him. "He's not perfect," she told Michael, "but he's trying. Give him a chance." The NeuroSync scandal added pressure. A federal investigation into the data breach threatened Caldwell Technologies stock, and James faced calls to step down. At a Burlington diner, Michael broached the subject, his tone direct. "Your company's all over the news. Mom used to say you'd rather build machines than relationships. Is that still true?" James winced but answered honestly, "It was. But meeting you, it's made me question what I've built." He hesitated, then added, "Your mother was the wisest of us. She built you. I'm trying to learn from her, even if it's 20 years late." Michael's expression softened, crack in his defenses. "She'd like that you're trying," he said quietly, "but it's going to take time." Outside, Burlington buzzed with student protests over climate change, a cause Michael supported through his architectural designs. James, inspired by his son's passion, began exploring sustainable tech investments, a shift that surprised his board. The father and son were far from reconciled, but each meeting chipped away at the distance between them, built on the memory of a woman they both loved in different ways. The December morning was crisp and clear, the sky over Oakwood Cemetery a pale blue that seemed to honor the woman whose memory bound the two men standing before her grave. It was December 2026, 1 year since James Caldwell and Michael Harper had faced each other in this very spot, their lives appended by a truth buried for 2 decades. James, now 59, stood beside his son, his silver-streaked hair catching the sunlight as he placed a bouquet of white carnations beside Michael's lily. The frost on Elizabeth Harper's headstone sparkled, her name etched in granite. Elizabeth Harper, 1972 to 2005. Architect of dreams, builder of hope. The words, once a painful reminder of James's mistakes, now felt like a call to redemption. The past year had been a journey of fragile steps and hard-won trust. James, the billionaire CEO of Caldwell Technologies, had scaled back his 16-hour workdays, a decision that stunned his board. The NeuroSync scandal, though still a thorn in the company's side, was stabilizing, with James redirecting funds to bolster data security and invest in sustainable tech moves inspired by Michael's passion for environmental design. Michael, now 21 and a senior at the University of Vermont, had taken the helm of Harper Designs, his mother's architectural firm, crafting projects that echoed Elizabeth's vision of sustainability. Their relationship, though not without tension, had grown into something real, built on shared grief and cautious hope. Today, as they stood together, Michael broke the silence. "She'd be pleased we found each other," he said quietly, his breath visible in the cold air. "Not vindicated. She never cared about proving you wrong. Just pleased the truth came out." He looked at James, his emerald eyes so like Elizabeth's soft with something new. Acceptance. James nodded, his throat tight. She deserved to see this, to know I finally understood. Regret laced his voice, a rare vulnerability for a man who'd built an empire on control. "I spent 20 years thinking I'd lost her to betrayal. I was wrong about everything." Michael reached into his coat pocket, his expression hesitant. "There's something else you should know. Something I wasn't ready to share until now." He handed James a small USB drive, its surface worn from years of safekeeping. "Mom left this for you. A video, recorded when I was 5. She said it was for the day we met, if that day ever came." James's hand closed around the drive, his heart pounding. Elizabeth's foresight, her unwavering belief in a future he'd nearly destroyed, humbled him. "Let's watch it together," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion welling within. Michael nodded, and they left the cemetery, driving to James's Beacon Hill mansion in silence, the USB drive a fragile bridge between past and present. In the study, where James had once rejected Elizabeth's pregnancy, they connected the drive to a screen. The video flickered to life, revealing Elizabeth at 36, her face thinner but radiant, her emerald eyes bright with love. She sat in her Burlington home, Michael asleep in the background, his tiny form curled on a couch. "James," she began, her voice soft but resolute, "if you're watching this, it means Michael found you. I don't know if you'll believe him, but I need you to know he's yours. Our son. I never betrayed you. The tests were wrong, and I couldn't make you see that. But I loved you, even after you sent me away. Michael is the best of us, your mind, my heart. Be the man I fell in love with, not the one who let fear win. Let him know you." The video ended, and silence enveloped the room. James's eyes glistened, tears he didn't bother to hide. Michael, too, was quiet, his gaze fixed on the blank screen. "She always believed in you," he said finally. "That's why she kept this. Why she put your name on my birth certificate. She wasn't hiding me to hurt you. She was protecting me until I could choose." James turned to him, his voice rough. "She was always the wisest of us. I built companies, fortunes. She built you." He paused, the weight of 20 years settling between them. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Michael, but I want to earn your trust." Michael's lips curved into a faint smile, the first James had seen. "You're trying. That's a start." The months that followed deepened their bond, though not without challenges. James's public acknowledgement of Michael, announced in a simple press release in March 2026, sent shockwaves through Boston's elite and the tech world. Asterisk, Caldwell Enterprises CEO confirms paternity of Michael Harper, 21, following a medical misdiagnosis. Mr. Caldwell expresses profound regret for the 20-year estrangement from his son. The statement, meant to quell rumors, only fueled more speculation on X, with hashtags like #CaldwellAir trending. Some praised James's candor, others accused Michael of seeking a payout. Michael, unfazed, declined James's offer to join Caldwell Technologies, choosing instead to grow Harper Designs, focusing on affordable, eco-friendly housing, a nod to Elizabeth's legacy and the climate protests, sweeping campuses in 22.5. Margaret Caldwell, James's sister, became a steady presence, hosting dinners where Michael shared stories of his mother's resilience. "She'd be proud of you," Margaret told him during a visit to Boston, her eyes bright with tears. "And she'd be glad you're giving James a chance." Margaret's warmth helped Michael see James not as a billionaire CEO, but as a flawed man trying to make amends. James, inspired by Michael's work, shifted Caldwell Technologies toward green initiatives, funding solar-powered urban projects and partnering with universities to research sustainable AI applications. The move, risky amid the Neuralink lawsuit, earned cautious praise from environmental groups and signaled a change in James, a man learning to value legacy over profit. During a walk through Boston's public garden, Michael asked, "Why the shift? You've spent decades chasing wealth." James paused, the spring air warm against his face. "Because of you," he said simply, "and her. Elizabeth built something lasting. I want to do the same, not for the headlines, but for you." This story is a testament to the power of truth and the resilience of love. Elizabeth's unwavering belief in James, despite his rejection, reflects a profound humanism, a faith in redemption, even in the face of pain. Michael's courage to confront his father, not for wealth but for closure, speaks to the strength of identity and the need to know one's roots. James's journey from prideful certainty to humble reconciliation reminds us that it's never too late to face our mistakes and rebuild what's broken. The story teaches us that love, whether a mother's sacrifice or a father's belated effort, can bridge decades of loss. It challenges us to question our assumptions, to listen when trust is tested, and to embrace second chances, no matter how imperfect. What would you do if your past demanded to be seen? Share your thoughts below, and let this story inspire you to seek truth in your own life. For more stories that move the heart and soul, subscribe to Legacy Stories on YouTube. Hit that notification bell to never miss a tale of redemption, resilience, and the ties that bind us. Join our community and discover the power of stories that remind us what it means to be human.